A new French Prime Minister has been appointed after the country's government dramatically collapsed for the first time since 1962. Michel Barnier lasted just 3 months before a no-confidence vote led to his downfall. So why did the government collapse, and what next for France? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady now. President Macron has named the centrist Francois Bayrou as the new French Prime Minister. But the country's political and economic future are anything but clear. Let's take a closer look now at what is actually unfolding in Paris.
The calm look of the French National Assembly masks the tension inside. Because there is again a firestorm in Paris. A collapsed government just 3 months after Michel Barnier became Prime Minister. He lost a vote of no confidence after attempting to push through a budget which was strongly opposed by politicians on the right and left.
We proposed a budget, a difficult budget, where everything was difficult, to reduce our deficit.
Forced to resign, Barnier is the shortest-serving Prime Minister in French history. In his place, the centrist politician Francois Bayrou, appointed by President Macron, who has called for France to unite.
No. We can't afford to be divided, and we can't afford to stand still.
Bayrou has had a long political career. He worked as a minister and ran for president, eventually helping Macron win his first election.
Nobody knows the difficulty of the situation better than I do. I've taken considerable risks in my political life to run on the issue of debt and deficit in the biggest and tightest elections.
But the economic problems are serious. The country's deficit is growing, its public debt is over 110% of GDP, and inflation is taking its toll on the public. One of the biggest issues is Macron's plan to cut public spending, angering both the left and the far right. Among those opposing the cuts is Marine Le Pen, the leader of Rassemblement National. She has rebranded her party as socially conscious and a defender of social protections, and wants to distance herself from traditional right-wing economics. There may be a new prime minister, but the same issues remain. Will Bayrou unite a divided assembly, or is France heading deeper into political and economic crisis?
Well, let's bring in our guests. In Saint-Malo, in northern France, we have Jacques Reland. He's Senior Research Fellow at the Global Policy Institute. In London, Peter Allen is a freelance journalist specialising in France. And also in London, Joseph Downing, Senior Lecturer in International Relations at Aston University. Gentlemen, you're all very welcome to Roundtable. Jacques, I'll come to you first. What do we need to know about Francois Bayrou? Who is this man?
Oh, he's an old hand. Francois Bayrou got into the politics about 50 years ago, something like that. He's now 73. He's the same age as Michel Barnier. And it's something quite ironic, is that Macron, who wanted to bring the new world, new politicians, people with no record, now in order to save his presidency, has to resort to using really old hands, old experienced men. Bayrou was last minister in 1997. His stint was as education minister, but he's been a presidential candidate on 3 occasions. Starting, he was candidate in 2000, 2002, 2007, and 2012. He was going to be a candidate again in 2017, but he gave up his candidacy in order to open the way for Macron. Macron would not be a president if Bayrou had not backed him in 2017. So I said that the irony is that he's the one who can come to the rescue today. And the thing, what is interesting, so he doesn't appear as a Macron stooge, because Macron did not want to appoint him. Macron wanted to appoint Le Cornu, one of his closest ally, part of his own party. He's a defense minister in the last government and in the previous government too. So and on the day, it was quite dramatic. On Friday morning, he was told he would not be the prime minister, that according, but he insisted. He said, if you don't appoint me, then I will stop my group, my centrist, will stop supporting you, which would make it very difficult for Macron. So he imposed himself on the president. And that is something that will help him in his effort to constitute a government and people, and to show that he is actually independent from Macron. He doesn't depend from Macron.
Let's bring in Peter.
He's not going to be a Macron stooge.
Let's bring in Peter on that. Peter, they say that Macron can't say no to this man, and now we're hearing why. He owes a lot to this guy, Bayrou.
Well, one thing it's very important to say about Francois Bayrou from the off, and it's been underplayed by most people actually, was he was very briefly a minister at the start of the Macron administration in 2017. And he was appointed justice minister. He lasted a month because his Modem party was involved in extremely serious embezzlement accusations. And earlier this year, he was finally cleared of all charges, but 4 of his senior lieutenants in Modem, they received suspended prison sentences. Now, you may argue that it seems incredible that Macron has showed him so much faith because of a record like that. But again, as Jacques was saying, he's an old hand. He's the kind of person who may be able to bring together warring factions within Parliament, same age as Michel Barnier. He's somebody who's been on the political scene for half a century. That's 50 years. It may come off, we shall see. But again, it's worth bearing in mind that he is quite a controversial figure. There are a lot of people who don't like him. A lot of people could argue that's simply because he's been around for so long. But that trouble with the law is worth thinking about. And again, one would suggest that he owes Macron quite a lot for overlooking that, Enda.
Joseph, is it a sign of how desperate Emmanuel Macron is that he allowed himself to be bounced into making this guy prime minister?
Definitely. I mean, Macron's facing a massive crisis, being hemmed in by both the left and the right. And also, I think people can sense in France that this is somewhat of a sinking ship, with this job being, to use another cliche, a poison chalice. In that whoever takes this job has got a very small chance, I think, of any kind of success. So I think, he's not exactly overrun with willing, young, enthusiastic candidates that want to take this job to make their political career, because I think this is more likely to be a job that will end a political career or stall a political career, as it has done for Michel Barnier, because I think the deadlock that France is currently in is unlikely to shift.
And Jacques, number one, top of the list of things to sort out in France, public finances. What is Bayrou going to do any different to what Barnier was trying to do?
Is going to be more or less the same, actually. But, Barnier had planned to have 60 billion savings, 40 billion in cuts in spending, and 20 billion in new taxes. But there was opposition. Barnier was undermined in that fight by the president's supporters, who are very adamant about no tax rises on business, that will be bad for business, etc. But Bayrou had another tune, sang another tune. He said that, we need, at this time, the wealthiest households and the most profit-making companies must contribute, even if it's not forever, but at least they contribute. So that is something that he will do. He will not hesitate to go against. But the biggest issue when you talk about public finances is the issue of pensions reform. Pensions account for a huge amount. It's nearly half the social budget, which is bigger than the state budget in France. So it's a lot of money. The pensions reform is the reason why the socialists did not want to join, because their condition what they should abrogate the pensions reform passed by Macron. And Macron, no way, for him is the big reform, and also not just for him, but for the European Commission. They said if France wants to embark on a strategy of budget deficit reduction, they need to implement this pensions reform. Bayrou has a position we say, yeah, this reform is necessary, but it's not perfect. We'll try to find a compromise, and he might be the person to try to amend it a bit. And I think the socialists might be ready to play ball with him on that score.
Let's bring in Peter. Peter, you've lived in France for a very long time. You've covered every single twist and turn in French politics for decades. Give me your reading of the situation France is in now. How bad are the public finances?
I think really it's an ongoing situation, Enda. It's been a horrific situation for years, for decades. It hasn't had a liberalising president, obviously in the French case, coming in and saying that France can no longer to spend so much on the French state. And president after president, Chirac, Sarkozy, all of them have come in saying that they are going to be the Gallic Margaret Thatcher we always used to write. It never happened. It always collapsed. All the reforms or whatever that were attempted led to street rioting. That's a very, very important part of the French democratic process. We talk about pension reform. I agree 100% with Jacques. It's all about pensions now, and that is the key issue now that Bayrou has to put his mind to, working with Emmanuel Macron. Some of the worst rioting I've seen in France hasn't been to do with Palestine. It hasn't been to do with the riots we had last summer over police violence on the estates. It was over pension reforms. It was absolutely extraordinary. You had youngsters out on the street. You had OAPs out on the street fighting the police. This was last year. Passions are so high over this issue. And again, this is a key part of public finances that have to be dealt with. I think the key person still, of course, is Emmanuel Macron. Like all of them, he sees himself as a legacy president. He wants to leave his mark on France. He's the money man. He's the liberalizer. He is the global capitalist, if you like, trying to reform this state that doesn't want to dive headlong into the modern world as other European nations have done. Certainly not domestically. France exports capitalism extremely well. It doesn't do capitalism particularly well within its own borders. So this is really the issue now. And I really think, rather than saying, look, this is an incredible new situation involving this new prime minister who's going to struggle, it's an ongoing crisis that has yet to be resolved, Enda.
Joseph, does the French public then understand how bad a mess they're in?
No, I don't think they do. An interesting part about French political culture is that people often will talk about the need for reform and the want for reform, but as long as it doesn't reform their particular privileges, right? They want reform to everyone else, right? The private sector wants reform of the public sector, and other people want reform of the police. And reform is a word that's bandied around in a way that can make it sound as if people are ready for some kind of change, but they're really not. And I think what's made this problem worse in this current political crisis is they've got Macron at the centre saying, no, we need to get realistic and we need to stop living beyond our means and we need to get a grip on public spending. But then they've got Mélenchon on one side and Le Pen on the other saying, no, this is total rubbish. We can deliver you this utopia where actually we will increase welfare spending and we will increase social spending. And this is the kind of really weird paradox of French politics, is that there's a crisis around money and Macron is being actually quite reasonable and quite honest, I would say, to the French people. But on both sides of him are these two candidates from very different ends of the political spectrum, promising something very different and effectively saying, no, we can deliver the utopia that you want. And somehow it's Macron, this evil capitalist that's worked as a management consultant. No, he's trying to rob you of your almost God-given right to your social privileges. So it's quite a weird context. And I think for French people inside of France, when they hear all of these conflicting voices, it's quite difficult for them to really know what to believe. And I think both Mélenchon on the left and Le Pen on the right have done a very good job of tapping into this almost revolutionary, rhetorical reservoir of ideas that no, it's those on the top that are trying to push you down. And it's those on the top that we need to topple to build this kind of heaven on earth utopia. So I do think it's quite confusing for French people to really know what's going on.
Jacques, tell me how weak you think Macron now is off the back of everything that's happened, the mistakes he's made this year. Are we into the last few months of Emmanuel Macron?
I'm not so sure about it. He's weak. Yeah, his popularity is really low. I think more than 60% of French people think that maybe he should resign. But I personally don't think he will resign for two reasons. Is that the only parties who want him to resign and want to snap elections are the Mélenchon supporters and the Le Pen supporters and the National Rally. They are both ready for a presidential campaign as soon as possible. But that is not the case of the socialists, who need to regroup and maybe rethink their attitude and their program. It's a work in progress. The socialists, where do they stand? What do they stand for? Which direction do they want to take the country? Nobody really knows at this stage. And the Republicans still don't know who their candidate is going to be in 2027. So they are not ready. They are not on starting orders for a presidential campaign. So they don't want Macron to resign just now. So that helps him to survive. And at the same time, Macron has one role in which he can still play. If he distances himself, if the people think that it's really Bayrou in charge of the everyday, like it should be. We are now in a situation where government policy is conducted, as it said in the Constitution, by the Prime Minister independently. Okay, he has to be under the aegis of the President, but the President is only involved in two fields: foreign policy, and as a privilege only in two domains: foreign and defense policy. And on that account, Macron is not bad. And in this difficult period, the French think he still has a role to play, that he has an aura, international aura. It's a very dangerous time for Europe, insecurity everywhere. And Macron is the right man in that position. If he doesn't get too involved, if he gives the impression he lets Bayrou govern France, for a few months maybe, but at least govern France, bring some stability, it will be all right for him. So I don't think he will have a difficult time in the last few years. I don't know how long it will last, but his immediate future is certainly not in the balance yet.
Peter, do you think Macron then regrets the snap decision he made earlier in the year for an election? You know, all the political choices he's made this year, they've not played out the way he wanted them to.
No, I would certainly say that he regrets that absurd summer election. It didn't resolve anything. It left France in a far weaker state. And it almost illustrated how ungovernable France is, certainly if you're looking at parliamentary government, which is meant to be enshrined in the Fifth Republic Constitution. What we're seeing more and more, and of course we've been seeing this for decades in my opinion, is that the presidential government is all important according to the Fifth Republic. Remember, it was formed in 1958 during the Algerian War, when France needed a strong man. It's always been a strong man to come forward and govern France. Of course, it was Charles de Gaulle at the time. It was an emergency measure, the Fifth Republic Constitution, and it gives the president so many powers that we can have a situation that we have now where Parliament is in absolute chaos. It can't get its act together. It can barely produce a government. And the president has to come in and rise above all this chaos and say, look, don't worry, I can sort it all out. One of the huge issues now, of course, is how much 49.3 this part of the Constitution that allows the president to bypass Parliament and enshrine legislation, as Macron has done many times since 2017 when he came into power. We were talking about pensions just now. He got through the original pension reform through 49.3, and that led to all kinds of trouble again on the street. There were riots. So I think at the moment there is an argument, a nihilistic argument, that Emmanuel Macron is rather enjoying all this. The point is, what he's doing is proving that France is ungovernable from a parliamentary point of view, and that we continue to need this one man who has the vision, who has the strength, who's supported by arguably the most powerful institution in the world even. An American president can be impeached while in office. I'm pretty sure it's impossible to do that here in France. So the president can move on and on and on. I don't think there's any chance of him resigning, certainly not before his 2 terms are up. And he'll still be a relatively young man. He won't even be 50 by the time 2027 comes along. So the direct answer to your question is yes, he probably does regret calling that election, but in some ways, all it has done is prove what everybody knows all along: parliamentary government does not work here in France, and that's why we have so much presidential government.
So, Joseph, watching from the sidelines is Marine Le Pen. She wants to be president. What's her game plan, do you think, heading into 2025?
Well, I think this is a situation which will play into her hands, really, because a lot of her rhetoric is around increasing social spending, lowering retirement age, promising French people that they can indeed have the utopia that Macron is now arguing that they can't. But I'm unsure if she's the best candidate, really, for the Rassemblement National in 2027. She's run twice, she's lost twice. I don't know if she's the best candidate of theirs to run in the next campaign. I would say keep an eye on Jordan Bardella, her much discussed young male deputy, who I think has a couple of advantages over Marine Le Pen. One, he's not tainted by the Le Pen name and the way that she is, having her father started the party in the mold of this sort of very much a xenophobic fascist party that she's tried to drag a little bit more towards the centre right. He's a man. I don't think France necessarily is ready to elect a woman president. Definitely not in the core voters in the rural areas and some parts of France in the south. And I think also she talks the talk, but I don't think she walks the walk, because she comes from this political dynasty. Jordan Bardella was born and grew up part of his life in a French council estate in the suburbs of Paris. When he speaks about issues that he speaks about, he knows about those issues. He has those credentials that money can't buy. So I don't know if Le Pen really is their best candidate for 27. I would keep an eye on someone new, someone fresh, and someone with the energy, I think, to really lead what will really be, I think, quite a messy and aggressive campaign, and one that I think the centre is going to find increasingly difficult to hold.
Jacques, just on that point, is France ready to have a female president or not?
Could be, but not Marine Le Pen, that's for sure. And one thing I would like to add is that Marine Le Pen rushed this thing, tried to create a political crisis by calling for the no confidence vote. And the only reason she did it, because she thought that it might trigger a political crisis and an early election, because after March, she might not be eligible. She is now charged with abusing European funds, and sentence which the prosecutor requires, it's the fact that she will be ineligible for quite a few years, which will prevent her from being in a campaign. But also, I think by voting the no confidence, she shot herself in the foot. She's no longer, the no confidence threat is a one-shot weapon. You can't do it again. And in the process, she annoyed many of her supporters, especially the farmers who were due to be given some financial aid at the beginning in the budget that Barnier presented, and who instead now will not get it. It was very interesting that a letter was published, written and co-signed by all the French unions, patronal union, employers union, workers union, except the communist union CGT, asking for stability. Stability, because instability is bad for the French economy. Instability means that companies don't want to invest. Instability means that we don't see the trajectory for public finances. So there's now in France a strong desire for stability.
I just want to bring Peter back in finally. Peter, just briefly tell me, how long do you give Francois Bayrou?
I don't give him very long at all. I think they're already talking about LFI, the France Insoumis. They were talking this morning about a no confidence vote. They're making all kinds of demands on him. It just takes a few other parties to join them, and he's gone. And he is an abrasive character. He was being quite abrasive towards Emmanuel Macron as well. He was telling Emmanuel Macron that he wanted until the end of this week to form his government. Emmanuel Macron was saying, no, we want it today, we want it tomorrow. You know, that's way too long. And he replied, well, you're never in the country, so what difference does it make to you? He's saying that Macron is showboating all over the place. He's off to Brussels late in the week, and he's got other visits and whatever. I don't think he'll last very long at all, and I think he's a marked man already.
Peter, Joseph and Jacques, merci beaucoup encore. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.